Are you properly washing the sheets, Kate? My father-in-law remarked as he lay on them. The thought of this becoming a regular occurrence sent a shiver down my spine. If we had lived together, such bizarre moments could have become part of my daily life. Just imagining it fills me with unease. A new chapter in my life began with a divorce, driven by irreconcilable differences over living arrangements. My name is Kate, and I experienced divorce at the age of 60. Yet, despite what others might think about aging, I believe that at 60, my journey through life is far from over. I've even taken on the challenge of learning how to use a computer, a skill that once seemed beyond me, by teaching myself through books. I refuse to let age hold me back from embracing new challenges. It's not that I'm trying to compete with the younger generation. Rather, I still see myself as young at heart. Life has thrown its share of challenges my way. The trouble began after my husband, Tom, and I finally paid off our mortgage, a decade after purchasing our home. We were in our late 20s when we bought the house, and as we neared the end of the loan, Tom started to bring up an old topic. "What do you think about living together?" he asked. "Living together? What do you mean by that?" I replied, though I already knew. "I mean with my parents," he said. This was a conversation we had before, and my feelings hadn't changed. "Tom, I think it would be difficult. Your mother and I don't get along very well. If we live together, it will just make things worse for both of us. I'm happy with how things are now." "We won't know how it'll turn out unless we try," he insisted. "Once we start living together, we can't just stop. You never want to try anything new." Tom had been suggesting this ever since we got married, even though he had been firmly against living together before the wedding. I felt relieved then, but after our marriage, he gradually changed his tune, as if he had been trying to trick me all along. I later found out that his mother, Jane, had been pleading with him, saying, "I'm worried about the future. Don't you care about us when we're old?" Without my knowledge, Tom had developed a sense of duty to live with his parents out of filial piety. I wished he had realized he had the right to refuse. I understand wanting to take care of your parents, but Tom knew about the tension between his mother and me. Still, he seemed unfazed, even as our relationship became increasingly strained. As we neared the final payment on our mortgage, his suggestions to live together grew more frequent and more pressing. Then, one Sunday morning at 7 o'clock, the doorbell rang. When I answered it, I was shocked to see my father-in-law, Mark, and mother-in-law, Jane, standing there with bright smiles. The early morning sun cast a glow around them, almost making the scene seem sacred, but I knew better. While I stood there, stunned by their surprise visit, Tom appeared behind me and welcomed them in with a cheerful, "Welcome back." "Welcome back," I thought. Normally, when visiting someone's house, you say, "Thank you for inviting me," and the host says, "Welcome." But Tom's frequent question, "What do you think about living with my parents?" flashed through my mind. This was troubling, and I couldn't just brush it aside any longer. What was happening? I followed my in-laws back into the room and found Jane carefully inspecting the antique cabinet. Unable to hold back, I asked, "What are you doing?" "Oh, there are quite a few scratches here," she replied, her tone full of concern. "It's a shame to replace it with a new one, though. Kate, you seem a bit clumsy. Please handle it more carefully from now on." What? I had chosen that cabinet myself, and after examining the spots Jane was pointing out, I couldn't find any scratches. Perhaps she was mistaking the natural wood grain for damage due to her aging eyesight. No, I have aging eyes too, but even I can't see what she's talking about. But this wasn't the first time Jane had made baseless accusations like this. It seemed she couldn't stand the idea of a daughter-in-law taking away her precious son. Despite how unfair her remarks felt, I decided to let it slide as usual. Suddenly, I noticed that Mark was nowhere to be seen. Just then, I heard some noise coming from the second floor. A sense of dread washed over me as I realized what was happening. I hurried upstairs, and to my disbelief, I found Mark lying on my bed. Not Tom's bed, face down. "No way," I blurted out in shock. "Kate, are you washing the sheets properly?" Mark asked, completely oblivious to my horror. No, I stammered, my voice rising in disbelief. "Absolutely not. Please spare me that." My words came out sharper than I intended, but I couldn't help it. "What's that?" Such insolence from a daughter-in-law, Mark snapped. "This has nothing to do with being a daughter-in-law." "Why are you sniffing someone else's bed?" I shot back, incredulous. "I was just checking if it's properly washed." "There's no need for that," I exclaimed. "Yes, there is," Mark insisted. "It's a necessary check for someone who's going to live here." "What are you talking about?" I asked, my heart pounding. "Really, the thought of living with such an insolent daughter-in-law is making me anxious already," he muttered. "Living together." The words left Mark's mouth, and I felt my world tilt as the unexpected reality of his statement sank in. I stood frozen in shock as Tom and Jane appeared behind me. "My, it's noisy here." "So this is where everyone is," Tom said, oblivious to the tension in the room. "Your father is talking about living together," I managed to say, my voice trembling. "What's that about?" "Exactly what it sounds like," Tom replied casually. "Huh? What do you mean by that?" I asked, a sinking feeling in my stomach. "We finished paying off the house mortgage this month," Tom said, "so we've decided to live here with my parents." "What? You decided that on your own?" I exclaimed, disbelief turning into anger. "I've been asking about living together for a while, hadn't I?" Tom said, as if this was a reasonable explanation. "And I said no, I can't live with someone who goes around sniffing people's sheets." I shot back, my frustration boiling over. "Did you say that in response to what Mark said?" Tom asked, his expression showing confusion. I clenched my fists tightly, trying to keep my emotions in check. "Well, don't worry about it," Jane chimed in, her voice sickeningly sweet. "Now that the mortgage is paid off, your role is over." She smiled brightly, as if she'd just announced something wonderful. "What?" I retorted, unable to believe what I was hearing. "That's right," Mark added with a scoff, waving me away dismissively. "You're no longer needed. You can get out." I felt a cold realization wash over me. So that's how it was. For years, I had been nothing more than a means to an end for my in-laws, a wallet to help pay off the mortgage. Jane had been watching our lives closely, biding her time, never giving up on her dream of living together. Now that the mortgage was fully paid, she believed she could have her beloved son back, and I could be discarded like yesterday's news. Fury bubbled up inside me as the full extent of their manipulation became clear. Certainly, I bore some responsibility for letting things get to this point, but this house was important to me too. There was no reason for me to be subjected to so much distress. But then, in a flash of inspiration, I remembered something, a fact that suddenly wiped away my despair and irritation. "All right then, that's fine," I said calmly, surprising even myself. Tom's eyes widened in shock at my unexpectedly smooth response. He had clearly never imagined that I would agree so easily. Perhaps Tom thought I would beg to stay or reconsider, but I was resolute. Up until the moment I left the house, he kept suggesting, "Won't you reconsider?" But I stood my ground. Ultimately, we divorced amicably. A month after the divorce, while I was enjoying the freedom of living in a hotel, having lost my place to live, I received a message from Jane, my former mother-in-law. She insisted on meeting me. Although I found it bothersome, I agreed, slightly hopeful as I had an inkling of what it might be about. When I arrived at the cafe where we had agreed to meet, I found Jane and the rest of the family, including Tom, sitting with gloomy expressions. As soon as she saw me, Jane's eyes welled up with tears. "Kate, thank you for coming," she said, her voice shaky. "What brings everyone together? Is there something you need from me?" I asked, curious but wary. "Actually, we received the notice of the division of assets from you yesterday," Jane began. "Well, yes, it's only natural to proceed with the division of assets since we're divorced, right?" I replied, maintaining a neutral tone. "Yes, but the situation has changed a bit from before," she continued, looking even more despondent. "How so?" I asked, sensing that something more was at play. My question seemed to dishearten them even further. "Tom's company went under," Jane finally admitted. I clapped my hands together with a smile. I saw that coming. It was only a matter of time. "What do you mean by a matter of time?" Jane asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. In recent years, Tom's salary had been decreasing, and there were signs, like delayed payments last month. Those are typical precursors to a company's bankruptcy. How could you not see it? I responded sharply. Jane, who should have had Tom's best interests at heart, asked angrily, "Why didn't you tell us earlier?" Tom flinched in fear, clearly rattled by the conversation. "I never thought it would actually go under," he mumbled. "Normally you'd notice such signs," I retorted, incredulous at their obliviousness. "Eh? Tom stammered, surprised by my response. I immediately pressed, so you didn't gather us here just to say that Tom lost his job, did you? What's the real reason we're here? Everyone fell silent, momentarily lost for words. Finally, Tom spoke up. The truth is, our house burned down. It was caused by my father's smoking. We suffered a huge loss because we decided to live with my parents. Stunned, I took a moment to process the gravity of their situation. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. I had indeed anticipated Tom losing his job when I decided to divorce him. I was unwilling to continue supporting a self-centered, jobless husband. Moreover, if we had lived together, I would have likely struggled with the pensioner lifestyle of my in-laws and possibly the burden of their care. Divorce seemed like the best choice for me. However, I hadn't anticipated Mark burning down the house. This was turning into quite the story to tell. I'm sorry to hear that, but it really is a tough situation, I said, masking my amusement. Now that my parents have also lost their home, they have nowhere to live and don't know where to start, Tom explained. So, you've become both homeless and jobless, I remarked, unable to resist pointing out the irony. Please, stop saying it like that, Tom pleaded. I'm technically homeless too, since I'm living in a hotel at the moment, I continued, but I've bought a new house, so I'll be moving out of that status soon. What? The shock on their faces was priceless. Time to enjoy their reaction. Do you know the high-rise condominium near the station? I'll be starting my new life there soon. A high-rise condominium? The mention of it instantly changed their expressions. It seemed a high-rise was a symbol of luxury and aspiration for them. My choice to live there wasn't out of desire for prestige, but for a secure and convenient living environment after the divorce. I wasn't even interested in the view. I chose a lower floor to avoid the hassle of waiting for elevators. We'd like to live there too, Kate. Can you forget about the past and let us live with you? Jane asked, desperation in her voice. That would be great, Kate, please. Though I had half expected it, I couldn't hide my astonishment at their audacity, asking to live with their recently divorced former daughter-in-law. Could it be that Mark intends to bring calamity even to a high-rise condominium? I'd like to help, but I'm no longer necessary to you all, remember? I was just a wallet to you, I said, my words dripping with sarcasm. Actually, we've always highly valued your skills around the house, they claimed, backtracking quickly. The house felt brighter with you around, Kate. You're considerate, beautiful, and incomparable to our son. Now that he's unemployed, he's beyond our control. Their son stood silently amidst the groveling, clearly uncomfortable. It seemed that no matter how beloved a son, if he couldn't support them, he was no longer of use to them. What terrible parents. Well, if we all lived together, it might not be so bad, I said, feeding consideration, prompting shocked expressions from my in-laws and Tom. It could be more fun than I thought. What do you mean by that, Kate? Tom asked, his confusion evident. I mean it quite literally, I replied, my smile seemingly lifting everyone's spirits. However, facing my ex-husband again felt a bit awkward. Well, if that's the case, Jane interjected cheerfully, don't worry about it. Tom doesn't have to live with Kate. Tom looked surprised. What? Why not? Mark added, that's right, Tom should live somewhere else. We'll take advantage of Kate's generosity. Why am I the only one left out? Tom protested. You don't have an income, Mark explained. We have our pensions, so we can contribute to food. But you can't. I really wanted to point out that moving into a high-rise and thinking food expenses would cover everything was naive, but I chose to stay silent and watched as the family conflict unfolded exactly as I had anticipated. Then why don't you, who have a pension, rent another place? I suggested. You've lost your job and we can't afford such frivolous spending. What if something happens? Mark countered. What are you talking about? We're still young. Elderly people should. Tom cut him off. How disrespectful. We still have our youth. One of them retorted, if you're so young, then work and use that income for the future. I can't even take a bath or go to job interviews in this situation, Tom shot back. You can always wash yourself in the river, came the reply. Always thinking about yourself, another added. Huh, you say that as if you do anything yourself, was the sharp comeback. Who's a failure? Tom shot back. We don't need such a useless son anymore. Jane attempted to mediate, asking, are you really okay with this? But Tom's reaction only seemed to infuriate Mark further, showing no signs of backing down. Turning to me with a smirk, Mark said, "This means we'll have more room, right? We're almost excited about starting a new life in the high rise." "Are you misunderstanding something?" My cheerful smile seemed to confuse everyone. "The size of the room is fixed from the start. I have no intention of living with you." "What do you mean, Kate?" Jane asked, clearly frustrated. "You only mentioned that living with many people might be lively, but you never said we'd actually live together." "That was the impression you gave," Jane argued. "It's good to see you, who abandoned your husband to live in a high-rise, finally being seen for who you are. You've always looked down on me, and now it's clear you want nothing to do with us." "Even after your house burned down," Jane added, her tone sharp. Tom, directing a severe gaze at his parents, said, "Kate is right. I thought honoring my parents was the right thing to do, but it seems they don't really care about me." The in-laws were left stunned by Tom's words, their expressions shifting as they absorbed the reality of the situation. "I was wrong," Tom said, his voice trembling. "Let's cancel the disarmament." "So, Dad, you just want to rely on your son again because you can't live with me, right?" I asked, my tone dripping with sarcasm. "No, that's not it at all," he stammered. His face was flushed, and Mark, who had hit the mark, began to fluster. Witnessing this, Tom's anger was visibly rising, veins showing on his forehead. "I refuse," he shouted. "Parents like you, disarmament is fine by me." The in-laws, now in a panic, pleaded with Tom to listen, but he wouldn't hear any of it. He turned to me and said, "Thanks to you, I really want to start over." "Really? Are you serious?" I asked, incredulous. "I am serious. You've done something that woke me up," Tom said. "You still have feelings for me, but you—" "Stop with that hopeful nonsense," I replied. "I was only thinking it would be amusing if, after all the cozy family attempts, the man who left his wife for his parents ended up quarreling with them." "I've only seen you as a means for property division," Tom continued. "Property division," I echoed. "You still plan to claim that from me? In this situation?" "This situation. I couldn't care less," I said. "Of course, I hurriedly signed the divorce papers because I wanted to leave, but I can still claim my fair share of the property division after the divorce. Be prepared." "Wait, don't you really love me?" Tom asked desperately. "How can I love someone who has no place to live or a job?" I said. "That's only possible in a fantasy world." "No way, this can't be happening," Tom exclaimed. Unable to win me back, Tom's anger erupted. He lashed out at his parents, blaming them for everything and starting a commotion. Before things could escalate further, I left the scene. As promised, I received my fair share of the property division. The amount wasn't large, but it marked the end of my relationship with Tom. He now struggled with reduced finances and became estranged from his parents. Living a challenging life, he tried day labor and spent nights in cheap lodgings or parks, leading a nomadic lifestyle. His age made it difficult for him to find stable work, and his parents, not attempting to mend their relationship with him, seemed to abandon him, relying on their pensions alone. Years passed, and Tom's parents remained a couple, solely concerned with themselves. On my end, I had investments I started before the divorce, allowing me to live relatively comfortably. Recently, I began attending a local class to deepen my programming skills. Though most of my classmates are children and students, I find the interaction refreshingly enjoyable. I feel as if I've gained many grandchildren, even though I don't have children of my own. A young girl named Livy, who showed an interest in knitting, has been learning from me during breaks. Soon, other children joined in, creating a warm, vibrant atmosphere. Despite various life experiences, I'm determined to continue living a fun and fulfilling life true to myself.